If you're a fan of professional wrestling and you watched the Iron Claw trailer, you may have noticed something right off the bat, and that's the omission of one of the 5 Von Erich brothers who became professional wrestlers. In total, there were actually 6 Von Erich brothers. The firstborn, Jack Jr., passed away in 1959 when he was in a tragic accident while walking through the Niagara Falls trailer park where they lived. He had been walking home from school and he was cutting around the tongue of a trailer when he somehow touched it and it electrocuted him. He was knocked unconscious and he fell face down into a puddle of melting snow and he drowned. Jack Jr. was just 6 years old. Jack Jr.'s parents, Fritz and Doris Von Erich, were deeply affected by his death, and the movie does mention Jack Jr.'s passing. There were 5 more Von Erich brothers, 4 of whom are portrayed in the film. They include the only surviving Von Erich brother, Kevin Von Erich, who's portrayed by Zac Efron, David Von Erich, who's portrayed by Harris Dickinson, Mike Von Erich, who's portrayed by Stanley Simmons, and the most famous Von Erich, Kerry Von Erich, who's portrayed by Jeremy Allen White. Omitted from the film is Chris Von Erich, the youngest brother, who had suffered from health issues throughout his life and never achieved the same level of success in the ring as his father and brothers. He was much shorter at 5'5", and his bones had become brittle from the prednisone he was taking for his asthma. There's a story of Chris Von Erich fighting alongside his brother Kevin Von Erich in a tag team match in Texas. And Chris hits his opponent and then raises his arm to block his opponent's retaliatory shot, and his arm breaks when the opponent hits him. Chris then looks at his brother and says, "I want to do my drop kick." And this kid had heart. Chris had heart. And Chris then proceeds to do the drop kick. And when he lands on the mat, his arm breaks again. Though he undeniably had a passion for wrestling, he became too weak and injured to thrive in the ring. In September of 1991, Chris took Valium and cocaine, and then he shot himself in the head with a 9mm pistol on his family's farm. His brother Kevin found him, not far from a pile of old Indian relics that Chris and Mike had once collected. For several years, Chris had been devastated by the 1987 death of his brother Mike Von Erich, who had taken his own life by overdosing on Placidil. Chris Von Erich left a suicide note that read, "It's nobody's fault, I'll be with my brothers." Now, in researching the Iron Claw true story, we did learn that the director, Sean Durkin, did have Chris Von Erich in his original script, but he regrettably had to cut the character because he could only fit so much into the movie. Instead, he blended elements of Chris into brother Mike Von Erich's storyline, depicting Mike as the sensitive youngest brother who couldn't reach the same level of fame as the others. Despite the consolidation of Mike and Chris in the film into one character, Mike, much of the real Mike Von Erich still comes across in the film. For example, the film depicts Mike's desires to pursue passions outside of the ring, including playing guitar. It also shows how his father, Fritz Von Erich, further pushed him into the ring after the death of his brother David, and he was essentially expected to somewhat fill David's shoes, which was something he was never really able to do. About his decision to cut the youngest brother, Chris Von Erich, from the film, director Sean Durkin told Entertainment Weekly, "That was one of the toughest decisions I had to make. You could make 9 hours of The Godfather on this family. I didn't have that opportunity. So I had to make choices of what could fit in a movie." If you want to learn more about the Von Erich family and the true story behind the Iron Claw movie, check out our article over on historyversushollywood.com. If you haven't seen it yet, I also recommend checking out the Vice series, The Dark Side of the Ring. Check out episode 4, The Last of the Von Erichs. It's available over on Hulu. As always, if you enjoyed this video, hit the like button and subscribe to our channel. Anchors away, my friends.